So let's start talking about home loans. Now, home loans are most commonly going to be principal and interest loans or reducing balance loans, in that you're paying off the principal and the interest at the same time until you reduce your balance to zero, hence repaying the entirety of the loan. Now, the difference between a home loan and other types of, common types of loans, such as car loans or personal loans or things like that, is that the amount that you're loaning is generally substantially higher, so commonly in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's generally taken out over a substantially longer period of time, so commonly between 20 and 30 years, and the interest rates tend to be lower. However, the total interest that you repay is considerable because the original amount of money that you're borrowing is so large, and the how long you're taking to reduce that balance is also quite lengthy. So that's something to consider when we're working through this. Now, there's going to be, some similarities to a lot of the calculations that we do, but it's going to be really important to look at how the total interest charge can start growing complexity as things change in the loan. So let's get started though by taking a look at this example. So we've got a home loan here of $350,000 that's taken out over 25 years with a 5.3% interest rate compounding monthly. The first thing we want to do is calculate the monthly repayments. So to do that, we're just looking at paying this a 25-year loan that's compounding monthly. So total compounding period is going to be 25 by 12. The interest rate here is 5.3%. The present value, now this is really, really important. You got to remember that $350,000 you're taking from the bank at the start of the loan. So it's going to be a positive when we plug it in here. The PMT, that's what we're after. That's our payments. The future value, we're looking to repay the entirety of the loan. Then the PY, we're making monthly repayments, so it's going to be 12, and the CY is also going to be 12 because it's compounding monthly. These aren't always the same, the PY and CY, so you do have to just quickly check in the question. So now we need to plug these numbers into our calculator to get our PMT, which when we do so, when my calculator wants to turn back on, we get approximately negative $2,107, and we actually get 704 in our calculator, which our general rounding rules, if you want to go to the nearest cent, would be 70 cents. However, with loans and when you're repaying them, we generally say that we round this up, because if you're only paying 70 cents, you're not quite meeting the minimum that you do need to repay to reduce it to exactly zero in 25 years. So we generally say that we round this up to the nearest cent to make sure that we are fully repaying the loan, which is going to slightly break, I guess, our rounding rules in this particular example. Now, because we've got a negative value here, I generally say we should interpret this. So therefore, the monthly repayments are approx $2,107.71. So moving on, how do we calculate the total interest charge? Well, essentially this one's a nice simple one for us. So we're still using this principle of total interest is equal to the total repayments subtract away the original loan. So essentially we're just saying how much we've given the bank, subtract away how much we originally took from the bank. So we're doing an approximate value here because we're making monthly repayments of $2,107.71. So the monthly repayments, so that's 12 times per year for 25 years. I generally, as a habit, put this into brackets just because it separates, in my mind, the total repayments versus when you're subtracting away the original loan. So the original loan here was $350,000. Technically, mathematically speaking, right now, it doesn't make any difference, but it's also a safe way to do because I know I've seen I guess examples previously of students I've had where they haven't put brackets in, and depending on what, how complex this particular calculation became, there were slight errors because of that, only because of the lack of brackets. So let's plug this into a calculator now. It's only to really note here that the total interest value that you can sometimes get can be rather substantial. They can be, higher than what the original loan actually was, depending on the circumstances. So don't be alarmed if you do get something that's quite large when you're starting to do this. So by 12, by 25, subtract away 350,000. So in this case, it's approximately $282,313. So that's essentially how we actually go about calculating the total interest when the interest rate remains constant. So the thing we've got to think about though is what assumptions have we made in this, and the biggest one is the fact that this interest rate is going to stay at 5.3% for the entirety of the loan. There are other assumptions we've also made here, but that assumption is very, very unlikely. Whilst you can get fixed interest rate loans, they're generally fixed for a certain period of time before they go back to a variable rate. And that variable rate fluctuates quite frequently and quite a lot throughout the entirety of the loan, which will substantially change the complexity of this particular calculation, which we'll start to see how it changes in our, the follow-up to this question just in here. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. So that's the biggest assumption here. Obviously there are other assumptions, like we're only repaying the minimum monthly repayment. We're not doing any kind of interest saving strategy, which we'll get onto in future videos, and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind as well, as we're starting to approach this. So let's take a look at, what happens if the interest rate actually changes? And because this can become rather complex, we're going to keep it relatively simple so we can look at mathematically what does the calculation look at, which then can be applied to more complex situations. So let's just say that after 5 years, the interest rate increased to 5.9%. What does that mean for the loan itself? Well, at that point in time, what it's going to really change here is the monthly repayments. To pay off this loan in time, because the interest rate has increased, you're going to have to increase your monthly repayments. That's the effect that it actually has on the loan itself. So the first thing we need to do is, we need to calculate the new monthly repayments, which are going to be based on the current outstanding balance of the loan. So the first thing you actually need to do is work out, what was the outstanding balance of the loan at 3 years? 3 years? 5 years? Hang on, that's a typo on my part. That there should be 5 years. My bad. So we're going to look at what was the outstanding balance of the loan after 5 years. So our N here is going to be 5 by the monthly repayments, so 12. The interest rate, that was what the interest rate was on the original loan, so that was 5.3%. A lot of this value, like these values, we're going to get for our previous, so present value, that was the original loan. We're taking the money from the bank at that time, so it's going to be a positive, so 350,000. The PMT here, that we already know now, so let's go back. That was approximately 2107.71. 2107.71. Now something that's really, really important here is getting the positives and negatives right, which means I'm going to have to make a little bit of space here. That has to be a negative value because you're making repayments to the bank for this. So just make sure that you're getting the positives and negatives right when you're putting it in here. Otherwise you can get some really wacky numbers, especially as things, once again, grow more complex. So the future value, that's what we're after here. We're after the future value after 5 years. And the PY and the CY here are both still 12. Now these aren't always the same, but they are in this particular question. It's the monthly repayments and compounding 12 times per year. So let's now whack this into the calculator. So 5 by 12. We're after our future value here. So our future value is approximately, so it's a negative $311,495.44. So because it's negative, I generally say that we should interpret it. So therefore the outstanding balance after 5 years, should have put a space there, is approx $311,495.44. So at this point, this allows us to now calculate what the new monthly repayment is going to be based on what the outstanding balance is after 5 years. So when we go through this, at end, we've got to consider how much longer have we got on our loan. Now, the original loan was 25 years. We're 5 years into the loan, so there's going to be 20 years remaining, and we're still making, like, they're still compounding 12 times per year, so compounding monthly. The interest rate, well, that's changed, so that's now 5.9%. The present value, well, that's also different from what it was at the start. Now, we generally say we put this as a positive because you've still got this money from the bank, technically. So it's going to be approximately $311,495.44. The PMT, well, that's what we're after. The future value, well, we're now trying to pay it completely off. The PY and CY, because they're the same, I'm just going to quickly join them just for the sake of space because I'm running out. So therefore, PMT, it's going to be approximately, this will be a negative when it spits out. So 20 by 12, 5.9%, negative 311,495.44. Reducing it back to 0. So our PMT is approximately $2,213 and 72 cents. So negative value, generally say we interpret it again. So therefore the new monthly repayment is approx $2,213.72. So now we look at, because we've got how much we were paying for the first 5 years and how much we were paying for the remaining 20 years, we can now calculate the total interest paid. So it's still looking at the same sort of, I guess, principle behind it of we're looking at total interest being equal to the total repayments subtract away the original loan. Now, it becomes more complex because our repayments actually changed partway through. So for the first 5 years, they were monthly repayments, and those monthly repayments were approximately $2,107.71. All right. Like I said, I like to put brackets here so you'll most notice me do that. But we also had more than that. So we had another 20 years of repayments, monthly repayments, that were approximately $2,213.72. So you can start to see here that suddenly the calculation of total repayments grows in complexity. So we now need to minus our original loan here of $350,000 and plug this now into our calculator. And we can work out what that exactly was. So 5 by 12 by 2107.71 is 20 by 12 by 22. 13. I always say take care when you're putting this into your calculator. Especially as it grows in complexity, because it's very simple, like very easy to make an error. And sometimes it can be really useful to maybe break it up a little bit, just to make sure that you're not making any errors. So we can see here that it's $307,755.40. So I guess that's how you go about calculating how the total interest is going to change when something changes partway through. And you can start to see here that that process is quite extensive. You've got to have what the original payments were. You've then got to calculate what, the future value is going to be when the change occurs. You've then got to go, well, how's that going to change the PMT in this case? And you've got to look at going, okay, well, the PMT changed this, which means it's going to change how our total repayments is going to be calculated when we're doing our total interest. And you can see that change here, that increase in that percentage, just that 0.6 of an increase, changed it from the total interest being $282,313 to, hang on, that was last video, to $307,755. Like, that is a significant increase because of that interest rate change. And that's something that you've got to really think about when you're taking out these loans. Is if you're taking out a loan that is really stretching your budget, if that interest rate suddenly increases, are you going to be able to afford it? And if you're not, you might have to reconsider whether that loan that you're wanting to take is the right loan for you. But I guess that wraps it up for this video in how we go about calculating home loans and how you go about calculating the total interest if things change partway through the loan.